Testing 1, 2, 3, testing. Hey, everybody, welcome to the lunch stream. Of course, my camera doesn't work. Let me get that working real quick. Here we go. The camera's now up. A little bit wrong. Let's get the angle fixed on that. Hey, everybody, happy Friday. How's it going? For those of you on video demand, obviously you may not be watching on Friday, but I hope your day's going well. My name is Aaron. I am a developer advocate, and this is the .NET lunch stream. And when I can stream, when I have free lunchtime to just hang out and talk about .NET. One of my favorite things to talk about. Well, I'd like to talk about a lot of things. Excuse me, but .NET's pretty cool. A pretty neat set of cross-platform technology for mobile, at least, to build pretty amazing things. And we've been playing around with all kinds of things on the stream in the past with Maui, Uno. I did one on Avalonian. We looked at native development for, if you go far back in the stream, I did a Mac app just to, getting started with a Mac app, just to kind of show off that it's possible. And now we've been working the last 4 or 5 streams on Maui. Sorry about that. Doing a little hydration break here real quick, make sure that I got the voice that I can talk. So what have we been working on? Well, we've got a .NET Maui app we're working on, and I apologize for not streaming more this week. I literally got sick, and when you get sick with the C word, it's just, things have not been great this week. I finally feel about 90% today, enough to code. And so that feels good when you can say that. Let's see here. What am I running? Let me stop this. Sorry. I forgot that I built something new. Let me switch this back over to reload. Let's see here. No, I need to make this the starting project. Oh, geez. Well, we're going to start the lunch stream with figuring out how to build selected project, but I need all configurations, and what I want is the Maui. Let's start with the Mac app and just make sure that works. I got a new app inside of here, so I need to explain what's going on. I'll get you guys all up to speed, but I was not feeling good. I did do some coding because when you're laying in bed, you're not feeling good. I feel useless if I'm not doing something. One thing that I guess that I was making a bigger deal out of than needed to be was the shell. We left the last stream, and I was a little upset that I couldn't figure out how to get the shell to work right. The bindings were becoming a problem with binding to the profile image, the full name, and the email address, right? And so we were trying to bind to the view model. And that's our key in Maui is we want to do these bindings with observable objects so that we can get the magic of this, so that if something changes it in the back end of the view model, some kind of thing like the API updates, or we get something for the database, the UI will magically update with these bindings. That was the big thing I was struggling to get done, or I wanted to get done, and I was a little cranky about the fact that it was not working the way I wanted it to work. So I should be able to click the run button here in the Mac application. We should be able to get this thing up and running. It looks like it's building without problems, and we should have it launch, and I'll show you it working. So if we look here, we're getting the email address. We see that the image is showing up and the name is not set because I haven't set it in the database yet, right? So if you're going to say, well, okay, Aaron, that's cool. How did you do that? How did you make that magic happen? All right. Well, to start out with, we are binding to just the view itself. So we have an app shell object, okay? And that's our shell. It's going to handle navigation for us. It's going to handle the flyout menu. It's going to handle the navigation header at the top. It is like a helper of sorts in .NET MAUI. You don't need to use App Shell if you don't want to, but it makes your development process faster because it's providing you a bunch of built-in functionality that you don't have to build them, and you don't have to handle navigation per se. You can have the shell handle navigation for you and dealing with the back and forward and the title bar and all those kind of things, right? So you can see here, I commented out the view model. That's the data type, but I commented that out, and I don't need it anymore, actually, so I'm going to kind of kill that. But we do know that the header, we've got a little fix in here because of a bug in iOS, and I guess it's going to come as part of Service Release 1. But that's not what I wanted to talk to you about first. I wanted to talk to you about how did I fix this binding issue. So I took the view model binding out from up here. You'll see that I don't define the view model anywhere. I don't need to. And then what ends up happening here, if we think about it, let's look at our view model real quick, actually, because that's, if we just think a little bit about our view model, the solution is quite obvious. Inside of the view model, we are an observable object. And we are making properties. We have these three properties here that we care about. Now, we're making them private, but what ends up happening is that this annotation will make public versions of these properties that will start with a capital letter. In fact, we can even see that I'm setting these right here. We're setting the default data. We're setting, here's the image name, not set, and email, not set. And then I need the authentication service because the authentication service is going to tell me when somebody's logged in, right? And that sends a message across the system. And then I can find out the authenticated user and get their email address. And I also can get their information from the database. So this should actually say get user profile info from the database. Okay. And we don't have that code yet, but that's our to-do. So this should be a to-do. And that way we can go get the information about the user, like their full name, those kind of things from the database, and we'll update dynamically that menu. Now that menu in the shell, the app shell, will need a bindable, right? Because we don't know how long it's going to take to query the database. But once the database comes back, we want to be able to have that information automatically, dynamically show up on the UI. So that's kind of our goal, right? Well, we know that these are observable objects here, which means that they support binding. And I was trying to figure out, how do I make those aware to the app shell? And I was trying to bind via the view model, but that doesn't work because other things we also bind for the template. So we know that we define inside of the view itself, inside of here, we're defining the flyout items. We have these menu items, right? So we define those in the UI, not in the view model. And so you see here, I have this menu template that tells it how the menu, how to draw. But I set the actual items inside of the main view here. I say, I have, however many items I have. Where are they? What's like here? We can go to the structure view here, and this should give us an idea right here. So these flyout items, these are where I define each one of the project items, right, in the code. So I'm not doing that in the view model. Now I could do that in the view model and pass those in, and that's one way to do it, but that's a lot of work. The XAML code's really easy to read, and there's no business logic that I need in the view model for these. So just put them in the view model so you can bind to the view model isn't necessarily, I think, a good idea. It doesn't solve my problem per se. And if anything, it makes my code a little bit harder to read. So how do I solve this problem then? Because I know that the menu only is with the UI. It shouldn't need to be the view model, but I need to bind to the view model. Well, I make a pointer to the view model no matter what inside of the app shell itself, right? We bring that in as part of app shell. You can see here that we take an injectable. So this is dependency injection. We're taking in the app shell view model. Well, if I just make it private to this, right? So I have a private read-only pointer to the view model. I can make public properties on it to those private, I can basically just rebroadcast those out. I could say, hey, if you're looking for the full name, here it is. It's from the view model. Well, the view model's version of this is an observable, which means that if this updates, this code would fire. So all I have to do now really is just simply say, and I don't even need this anymore because I can talk to it directly through the view model. So I actually could do this. I can just say, I'm going to use the view model. The view model has the observables. So it's out now inside of my app shell. Well, I think I was using those right here. So let's put those back. I was using those for my bindings. Let's put this back. And so now the theory would be is I could just say, go to full name here in my view. My view is going to have the information for the view model. This should dynamically change as needed when I update the code, right? And so, so like if the database comes back with the stuff, we'll just broadcast that out. Shell will see that, and because it's a binding, it'll update. So this magic should all just work. And so far it has, right? So if we go look, now we're seeing the images stuff. So now we've come into the interesting part of this project where we can see here we've got all this working. We've got to the point where we can click update profile, but you can see here I'm logged in as Jay Moore by default, this new user. But I have a couple different things that are going on now that I have to worry about. So one, I need a database. And needing a database is relatively complicated. Cancel, I don't want to move that. Let's open up VS Code. And I should make sure that that doesn't instantly load in some code that I want you to see. Let me make sure I do this off screen and I get the proper folder so that you guys don't see anything that you're not supposed to see. All right, let's take a look here. So now we got some challenges. And I'm opening VS Code. You're probably saying, well, why am you opening VS Code? Why can't you just do some writer? Well, I'm about to have to work on Docker. And when I work on Docker and stuff, I could do this in writer, but I find the VS Code stuff is pretty good. So you see here that I have something called a Docker Compose file, and there's nothing in it right now. But then if you look here, I should have an automation directory. Inside of here, I've got a bunch of different pieces of automation, these things I need in order to make magic happen. And so I should have like a Docker file for Couchbase server, which I'm gonna have to change this out a little bit here because I discovered some stuff. And I can't use the theory that I wanted to use before, which is I want to set up a Docker Compose. So what is Docker Compose? It's an automation system that automate a building of a bunch of Docker images. And Docker is the ability to run servers, database servers, web servers, all kinds of crazy things on your local computer. So I can just run Docker here. The whale icon, some people call it. This will take a second to fire up. It's not always the fastest program in the world, but you can see here, I don't have any containers running right now. And so Docker is really popular. A lot of times you run a Docker file, then maybe in the cloud you're running Kubernetes, it's called, or K8S is the short term for that, if you didn't know that. I've done Kubernetes a lot in my career. It's not bad. I think it's probably the right way to do infrastructure these days. You see here, I have some images, right? So I've got a Couchbase server image. I've got a ASP.NET. I've got some example images I was doing when I was helping some people work on the code examples we have for ASP.NET. I'm going to delete those images because they take storage. And you can see here, they're 1.7 gigabytes, 1.37 gigabytes. And if I'm not using them, I don't need them, so I can get rid of them. Now, I would like to have an automated setup of a couple different things that Couchbase server and Sync Gateway, for example, that allow me to sync information between a database server and my mobile app. That's what I want. Okay, that's what I'd like to do. I would like to use a new piece of technology to do this. Okay, and that's where this is going to get kind of a little interesting. There's something called Couchbase Sync Gateway X attributes. And these are called extended attributes. Extended attributes are pretty awesome. What they allow us to do is set some attributes on a document, right? So that's like a record in a database. And we can then use that for setting the security of something. So like who can access it? Which devices should this document sync down to? These are important things. Now, originally what I like to do is I like to take all my sample data, load it into the database with a tool called CB import. That's built in the Couchbase server. So what I could do is I can just have like a repo that has all my data files in it, and then I basically tell the Docker image when it builds Couchbase server to set up Couchbase server, but then to load it all my sample data. Okay. And then magic stuff happens, right? Then it goes through, it automatically builds a server. And as a developer, I guarantee that if I just run a Docker Compose, all my infrastructure just automatically builds and it's ready for me to do mobile development. All my sample data is there. And so that means if I'm trying to work on something, I instantly have data I could play with. I don't have to worry about generating data. I don't have to worry about mocks. It's just instantly all available. It makes my life 1,000 times easier. This is how I like to develop. My problem is X attributes are not built into CB import, and I did not know that until relatively easily. This is a new feature in Couchbase, and so I work at Couchbase, but this is something that I knew that the feature existed, but I didn't know CB import didn't have support for it yet. So that's a problem because that means that my whole strategy of doing this, I had to change on the fly. And I did not expect this. So when I was off not feeling well this week, I started researching that in my free time and discovered this. So that means that I'm going to have to change the way that I was thinking about doing this. So this idea of copying over all my data and just processing it here is not going to work anymore. Okay. So I need to get rid of all that because all I'm going to do is process the server. That also means that the way I set up the server is going to be a lot different too. So you can see here, this is a script file. So what I do is I like to start up the server and then I come up with a custom setup for it. And I'll pass in like the administration username and password via a script. Environment variables usually is the way to do this, by the way, right? So you tell it to read the environment variables, whatever you set as environment variables, that's what it will use for that. And by doing that, then you just tell developers, set some environment variables on your machine. You have to check in username and passwords into the code. This makes life way easier. You're not trying to regex substitutions and all those kind of things, right? So you can see here, I am going to create the cluster by doing this. So this is what this does is this is a Docker file. Right here, and the Docker file just says copy this over. And then what's going to happen is this part of when I use Docker Compose, I'm going to tell it to run the script. And what the script is going to do is do an initial setup. And it's going to say, if this file doesn't exist, then we're going to do a setup. Once I'm done with the setup, I'll create that file. And so this should only run once, the creation process. That's the idea behind it. Of course, I got a ton of comments of like, this is how, understand how to knit a cluster via the command line. This is, read the stocks. Basically, this is set up everything I need. I want analytics in here. So I actually have this a little bit goofed up. Let's do that, right? Since we're already here and we're playing around, let's just go to that page and I'll show you exactly how I would do this if I was working on this. Because I am, right? And this may help you to understand like how should you think about from a standpoint of learning of like how to do something. I always will have links to docs in my code if I feel that another developer on my team doesn't understand how something works. That's really important to me. So if we look here, we're going to need some stuff for analytics. We're going to need this entry already, the RAM size for that, right? So I'm going to just move this back over. I'll have to move it back and forth so that we could see. Well, I guess we can just swap between this and the editor, right? At some point in time. So let's go back to the editor. I'll be a little slower. I usually have this on one big monitor and I can swap between them as needed. But we know we're going to pass in the RAM size. So we're just going to say after eventing, we're also going to need this. And we'll just make a variable for that. We don't have yet, but we'll just call it Couchbase analytics. Analytics RAM size. Thank you, code complete for that. And so now we know that we're going to have to send that so that we know what analytics is. But we also need to set analytics. And so we have to kind of look back at the Google or at the docs to see how we set analytics. So that is a setting. Let's go back to our code actually and see what that setting's called, because that way we can just control find it. So services, we need dash services to figure out how to turn analytics on. So we want to just go to dash services. There we go. And this should give us a range of services. And right there is the name we're looking for, analytics. One sec. Okay. So let's go in here and take a look. So we need to add that word in. This will tell it to start analytics. And this will tell you how much RAM to use for analytics. Okay. That'll at least get analytics up and running. And we should probably not have a space here because we don't have a space between all these. All right. That's good. We need analytics. That should get it up and running. So then we're going to create a bucket. We're not going to worry about some of the other stuff with analytics. That'll be for a later demo. But for right now, we're just trying to get mobile up and running. So we need to create a bucket to store data, and we're going to take the bucket name from here, from the... I don't think that that's a good idea anymore for our sample data because technically speaking, we need to make a scoping collection, but multiple collections. I guess we could keep the bucket so that you can name it whatever you want. That way, if you're testing, you can have the bucket created twice, I guess, 2 different buckets. We'll keep it like that for right now, but I have a feeling this is going to have to be hard-coded or changed a little bit. We'll figure it out, I guess, when we get there. So we know we're going to create a bucket. That's just a storage. Think of it like a bucket in AWS. It's just a place you can store documents. A RAM size, this is how much memory the bucket can be. So that's how much information you can store in it. And then we're not going to use Magma right now. We're just going to use Couchbase for the bucket type. There's multiple bucket types out there. There's something called Magma. Magma is a storage engine. That means that the data is stored more on disk than in memory. The advantage to that obviously is you can just fit a lot more data because you can have it cache off disk. Couchbase, if we use regularly, means that it's going to be more of memory. All the documents, it's going to try to chew up as much memory as it can for all the documents. So it's going to be faster because the data is in memory. It doesn't have to go to disk. Don't get me wrong, Magma is still very fast. It will know documents that are used frequently, and those will be in memory first versus documents that may just be on disk because no one's using them. Like most database engines. So Magma is a good idea to use. It's not compatible with every feature in Couchbase right now. So that's another thing is you have to look at each feature like analytics and eventing and all those other features and see, does Magma have support for that? And the biggest problem is full text search, I believe, still doesn't have Magma support yet. So that'd be if you're using full text search, you'd want to stay on a regular Couchbase bucket versus going to a Magma bucket. All right, let's see here. We need to make a user. And the user we're going to make is going to allow us to sync with Sync Gateway, which is another thing that we do. So we have Couchbase Server. It stores the documents. Sync Gateway allows us to sync documents between a mobile app and Couchbase Server. So we need to make a user, though, that the Sync Gateway user can use to talk back and forward with. And so that's what we're doing here. We had to do some RBAC, or role-based authentication. And we're going to make a RBAC user that Sync Gateway can use right here. You can see here to allow it to do mobile sync with that user. So that's going to set that up. And then we've got a bunch of things here where we're creating scopes and collections. This is where we're going to store our data. Think of it like folders on your computer in many ways, right? So maybe the bucket is your hard drive, and then you have a bunch of folders that you're storing data in. So scope is a high level, and scope contains something called collections. And then collections are where your documents live. You don't have documents that live in scopes, for example. They live in a collection. So we're making some scopes here. The first one we're going to make is something called retail, and that's going to be any of our analytics retail data for our ERP, our electronic enterprise project management system. It's a lot of times that use these for like inventory management and stuff like that. So we're going to try to build a mini version of one of these. And so we need all of our data for our warehouses and stuff. This is our audit data that we use for a mobile app. We have work orders. That's because we have a project management system. We'll have work orders. We'll have different work that people can do. One of those would be like an audit. You may have a work order that says you need to go do an audit of a certain warehouse's inventory. And then personnel is going to be where we store things like our user profiles, our team members, those kind of things, right? So that's our scopes, where these are going to be like folders on your computer. And then we need a place to put the actual data itself, the documents. So we're going to make one called customers. That's going to live inside of the scopes called retail. Okay. We're going to make orders, and that's going to be also be in retail. And this is going to be primarily used for analytics data. We need warehouses. Warehouses is part of retail. That's going to be all of our warehouse locations. We need districts, and that's going to be like the districts that we sell out to, because since this is the sample application for inventory is based on beer, and beer a lot of times as companies, they're distributors, which means they're going to have distribution things, districts that they distribute their stuff out to, and then the resellers go to that place to get the beers. And then of course we're going to have items. Those are like our inventory itself. Now for orders, we're going to have work orders. We're going to have like projects and work items. These are tasks that have to be done. And that may be an audit on an inventory, for example, right? That could be a work item. Now we also have internal inventory. That's going to be part of our audit. We want to know in the inventory system, it says we have 20,000 cases of a certain type of beer. Well, when we go to audit that in a warehouse, we want to see, do we really have 20,000 of those items? Well, we need then some kind of internal inventory that we could use to track the audit of the item. So we're going to do that inside of the audit scope. And we're going to have that available to us for using it there. We also have offices. This is going to be like for our personnel, that's going to say which offices are available for people. We're going to have something called user profiles. Okay, user profiles, what's going to save your picture, your job title, all the things that makes you, right? And the system usually should have this, right? Some kind of HR system usually injects this into the, automates the user profile creation. You just go through and modify it to add your employee picture and maybe your cell phone number or something like that, right? So we'll take a look at that. That's what the mobile app usually will do is you already have your user information in there. You're just updating with the information that the HR system didn't bring in. All right. We also need to make some indexes. So I'm not going to get into this right now. This is getting pretty big, but the server, when it automatically creates, we're going to try to create some indexes that make it so we can use the data and test the data and make sure that the data is available. And anybody that knows anything about databases knows in order to find things fast in a database without looking at every single item in the database, you need something called an index. So these are just going to go through. These are some REST API calls. I'll go through and just add some just core basic indexes. If we look here, now this is where it says load sample data into buckets. We're not going to do this. So I'm going to comment all this out because this is what I was saying. I found out that CB import doesn't support my my ability to add the X attributes. So if that's the case, then I don't need to use this because I need X attributes in all my data. So that means I'm going to have to write a program to load the data. And that's fun because that means we can write that program in .NET. I'm going to just kill the rest of this because we just don't need it. We just need one example. If we decide to go back to this, maybe they add support in it. I just want a syntax so I don't have to go look up the syntax for it again. So I'll keep one of these in here just for documentation's sake. And then I'll put a note in there that we now are using the .NET program to load data instead. This also technically makes our Docker image load way faster because we're not trying to import a bunch of data before we can say that the Docker image is done. That means Sync Gateway will also start faster. All these things are not bad when we're trying to load a system. So we'll just delete all this. And then we can see here, we create that file. Touch will go through and create a file. And by doing that, we know that we also don't need this line because we're not loading the files anymore. All right. So we're going to say here, import data into sample buckets. And then we're going to say no longer used because of X Sync Gateway X attributes support. Boy, if that's the right link, my AI friends are getting a double bonus here. Let's see, is that the right link? Let's go back to our code and see. I don't think that that's the right link, but it's like a VS Code's writing the right links for me. I mean, our AI overlords are, yeah, it's not the right one. Okay. So we're going to link to that document instead because I know that that's the right one. And instead, what we'll put in here, we'll take that document out. We'll say use it's called .NET CB Lite inventory data loader to load data. And then let's take this link up though, because that's the real place. And then we'll put some and then this is probably a lot to put in our script, but this is going to make it easier for us to remember if we need to get that period out of there. All right. Actually, let's 3, make this, put it down here. And this way we have some documentation explains why we pulled this. And then maybe make this into another line so that it doesn't look out of place. All right, we can still read that on one screen. This looks like a much better cleaned up Couchbase server file, so I think we're good there. This should get our at least Couchbase server knitted up. We don't have anything in Docker Compose yet. That's going to be a problem. So we need, our infrastructure is going to have two things. It's going to have a server and it's going to have a sync gateway first file. So you can see here, we also have a, we're going to try to get sync gateway up and running. We have two things we care about. We care about a sync gateway JSON config file and then a shell script file once again. And it's the same concept. We have a configuration. This is the configuration of the sync gateway server. And this, it deserves a call on its own, to tell you, or a stream on its own. For right now, let's not focus too much on this other than it's really complicated. And I'm going to hard code some username and passwords in here just to get us some sample users set up and stuff. You should really call REST API to do this, and you shouldn't have this in your code. But since this is just a demo and we're hard coding users already in our authentication service, we just need to make sure that the same users in our authentication service are duplicated in our sync gateway configuration. That's what you need to know. You should be using something like Azure AD or what's our friends over on any kind of ODIC platform, open authentication platform. Azure AD is the one, or I think they renamed Azure AD. What's Azure's AD's new name? Azure AD is now called Microsoft Entra ID. Ooh boy. And Azure AD competitors, because I can't think of the name right now. Okta is one I've used in the past. They're pretty good. I've also used Ping Identity. Ping Identity was a big one that I was working on when the previous company I worked at. So Ping and Okta are also great solutions. Obviously, Google's got its own solution. Facebook's got its own solution. AWS has its own solution. So it's really up to you to decide what you want to use. But for right now in our example, we use hard-coded users, and maybe we'll take a look at Azure since most .NET people are Azure. Maybe I'll spin up a Entra AD service on my personal Azure and show you how to sync that in also. All right. So I've already pre-configured a file with some sync JavaScript code, which, like I said, on a separate stream I'll go into, because that's really, you want to dedicate some time to explain how that works. Instead, we're just going to see if we can get something up and running real quick. Okay. And see if I can load some data in with .NET, because the stream primarily is for to talk about .NET. So because of that, we have an empty Docker Compose file, and that's just not going to work. So I'm going to open up an example I have. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to cheat a little bit. I've done this many times before, so I'm going to copy one of the examples I have, and then we're going to use that for a basis, and then we'll tweak it as we need to. And anytime you have code that you can either reuse or borrow from, do that. As a person, I'm going to tell you I do it all the time. I'm not going to lie, and I think it's a very efficient way to get your stuff. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to go into my Docker Compose file, and we're going to just put some stuff in, and then now we'll take a look at it. So first thing we know wrong is, I think Docker Compose version, we should be at 3.9 now. Docker Compose 3.9 version 3.9, I think. Let's see here. I'm looking at the Googles. So Docker does support the latest 3.9, so we're going to make that 3.9. Answers that question real quick. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. So the file I grabbed was a little bit older. So Couchbase server. This is going to be the name of the very first container, and that's just a server that we're going to spin up. And so we need to give it this is just like a tag. This is a format called YAML, or YML, if you've never seen it before. It's a very popular way to do DevOps. And so we have to tell it what the build to start out with. Well, the first thing is the Docker Compose file is actually sitting a couple out from the automation folder. So we would have to say /automation/Couchbase server. And what it's going to do then, it's going to look in that folder, the automation Couchbase server folder, and look for a Docker file, because that's what Docker Compose does. So we need to tell it what ports Couchbase server uses. These are the network ports that the database server is going to use. I can just tell you that these are used for SSL and these are used for regular. Since we are not going to worry about SSL today, we're only going to open the standard ports and one SSL port. We need to make a cluster. A cluster makes, at Couchbase, there's no such thing as a non-cluster. Some platforms like MongoDB or SQL Server, you could basically spin up a single server. In Couchbase, even a single server is a cluster. That's just how it works. We scale by default. On other platforms, you may have to work hard to scale. We scale fast. Just that's what we do. We're good at it. That's one reason you want to use Couchbase. If you ask me why I work at Couchbase and why I like Couchbase so much, is because it's ridiculously easy to scale to like ridiculously large amounts of data to a ridiculously large amount of requests per second per server. It's rather awesome to see how quickly you can spin up something that a single server that can handle like hundreds of thousands of requests a second. So we are going to hard code some passwords in here, but like I said, we probably should do this via environment variables eventually. This is just a test environment, like a development environment, but I don't like having passwords in files. So we should probably eventually change this out to use environment variables. That's if you're doing this in a real production application, that's what you would do. So we have our username, our password, our bucket's going to be called projects. I don't think that that's the right bucket name for that anymore. We should probably call this inventory ERP. I think that's going to be the best name, but let me double check here. So yeah, I think we're going to call this demo. I don't like using special characters and bucket names because then you also have to do that in your scripts. So pro tip, don't use special characters in your bucket name. And we're going to call this demo ERP inventory. So our bucket RAM size, how much memory is our bucket going to take up on disk and in memory? So this is how much memory your computer has. You got to think about this long and hard. And you have all kinds of things that Couchbase server is going to use. So if you have a small laptop, you have to be pretty stringent about this. My sample data, I don't need anything more than 512 megabytes of data. So that's fine. I've got an RBAC username and password. That's the RBAC user I was telling you about that we're going to use for talking to Sync Gateway. So we have an admin with a password. We have RAM size for Couchbase server itself. And then we have indexing RAM size and eventing RAM size, but we're missing a value here. We need to set in the thing that we made it called analytics. I think that was Couchbase and analytics RAM. I think that's what it was, but we got to go look at our server file to make sure that we have the same names because otherwise this won't work. So we passed in, when we created it up here, we passed in the service right here. This is what we're setting. Let's go back to our Docker Compose file, make sure that matches. If it doesn't, bad things will happen. Perfect. I think analytics needs 1 gigabyte. Couchbase server analytics memory default. The default size for analytics. 1024 megabytes for analytics. So if you're bringing this up, you are bringing up some memory because you're going to need 512 for, or excuse me, 2048. So 2 gigabytes of RAM for Couchbase server, 3 gigabytes when you add eventing. Oops, index is wrong. Index should be 512, and it was analytics. I'm supposed to make 1024. Okay. 2 gig of RAM, 3 gig of RAM, 4 gig of RAM. So to run this Docker image and all its stuff, you need 4 gigabytes of RAM on your Mac. Most Macs come with like 8 by default, so that should be enough to run this for testing. And obviously you turn it off when you don't need it. That's the real answer too. Oh, let's make sure there's no space in there. That seems like it's good. This is the host name. You need a host name to talk between multiple Docker images. So when you have multiple servers running, you need a host name, and then you'll use these container names and host names to talk between the machines. And so we're going to tell it what directory Couchbase is using on the box. We're going to tell it to copy how we're going to tell this to start is to say to copy this command script in. We're going to run this command script, and this command script will tell Couchbase server how to start basically. And so that entry point is nothing because the command we're going to run is this, and that's that shell script I told you earlier that I have that either starts Couchbase server or sets it up and then starts it. And at the very bottom here, you'll see here that we use this to know whether or not we're starting it or not. So that's what we got here. That should be right from what I remember. Because the entry point's right here. This should tell it to start Couchbase server. So Couchbase Server, very first line should start, and then it should start doing all of its magic stuff. Okay, sync gateway. We're going to do almost the same thing we did up here. We need to make sure that's in the automation directory, because if it's not going to find the Docker file. We're going to turn on the ports for sync gateway. That's 4984 through 4986 on TCP and UDP for those ports for traffic. One is used for syncing. The other one's for the admin API. So 84, I think, is for syncing. 85 is for the admin API. One's for SSL, if I remember right. All right, host name, sync gateway. Container name, sync gateway. This all makes sense. Depends on Couchbase Server. It will not build this Docker image until the Couchbase Server image is done running. We're going to give it, this is where we're going to say the working directory for sync gateway is. And we're going to copy a shell script that also starts sync gateway. Now, the last thing to talk about is this right here, networks called bridge. Okay, I've got a network here, and then here I've got a network. Docker containers out of the box cannot talk to each other. They're isolated machines. But what you can do is you make something called a bridge. And what a bridge does is makes it so that anybody on the same bridge can talk to each other. So think of it like a switch, a network switch, or a network hub. You may have heard these terms before, like on the old days when computers needed cables before wireless. Well, that's what we're doing here. We're making a virtual device that these containers are going to plug into so they know how to talk to each other. That's what this is doing here. So once we have that, the magic should be able to start. Now, I'll tell you right now, troubleshooting getting Docker Compose working is patience, young Jedi. You have to have a lot of patience. It's probably not going to work out of the box. You probably have some typos you have to fix. And so the command we do is Docker Compose -d up, I think is the word we want. Is this right? Let me check my docs. Pretty sure that's what you want, is Docker Compose -d. Let's see. Pretty sure that, let me Google this real quick. Can't remember if the dash needs 2 dashes or not. Docker Compose up -d. Pretty sure that's what it is. Docker Compose up -d is, I'm pretty sure, the command that will give us the details of what the hell's going on. I guess let's just do a help on it. I'm not seeing it. What does -d do? F is file. I don't care about that. The file's already in the directory. We don't want down. We want the word up. So I think I have to do this up -help and see what the commands are. Yeah, so D here, detach. So we want to run the command. We want to run the containers in the background, which means when we bring them up, just keep them running, and we'll use the Docker UI to update them. Oh, warp needs an update. Let's do a warp update real quick here. So we definitely want -d. So we want to say Docker Compose. Because otherwise, if I were not to do the -d, what would happen is the minute that the terminal window closes, my Docker container images would close. They would stop running. And I don't want that. I want to control this in Docker. So we want to be able to control this via this little whale icon here. So we see here we've got nothing. We should be able to do magic sauce here. What we should be able to do is just run this Docker Compose up. And you should see now it to start to work. The hope is that it reads the Docker file. So you see here is reading the Couchbase server file. So far, so good. Like I said, this is a little bit of trickery with Docker Compose. I very rarely get it right the first time. I usually typo something in the YAML file because YAML files have to have tabs in the perfect spot. And if they're not, then it goes bad. So usually I have to go back in my YAML file, look at the tabs. I use a VS Code plugin to count the periods. Let me show you that real quick while we're waiting. And it's a good tip to have. So if you have a YAML file, for example, this Docker Compose file, see these periods? These are tabs. You have to guarantee that everything's tabbed over. So when there's a thing underneath Couchbase Server, it has to be tabbed over underneath this one. And these tabs are really important. You can see here, I only have one tab between ports and these port numbers. You can see here, I'm counting periods. I have these periods show up, so I make sure everything's lined up exactly how it's supposed to be lined up in order for this file to read properly. If any of those tabs are in the wrong spot, there's a good chance your Docker Compose is going to fail. It's going to say it can't load the file, and that's the reason why. Now, I cheated. I used the Docker Compose file I already had, and I just tweaked it. because of that, my chances of success were much greater. And so I should have this. And if I go look here, I now have my .NET inventory. And if we look here, we've got some services running. In fact, if we go look at this, we have two of them. We have both Couchbase Server running. And if we go look up at the logs, we should see that it's telling us our password because I like to copy and paste it from here so I don't have to think about it. It tells us all the stuff it did. You see here that it's bringing up the Couchbase server. It's going through and creating the scopes and collections, which means now, technically speaking, if I were to go into the web API, right, on port 1091, I already copied that password, so let's show all the ports and go here. I should be able to say administrator. Ooh, that password's the wrong password. Let me go get the right password from Docker. That's clearly something else I copied. I mean, that's not the right password. This is the password. Like I said, this should come from the environment file. I'll fix that in a bit. Right now, we're just trying to test this, see whether or not we can get it up and running. Let's go back to our Chrome browser and kill this for the password. Make sure it's not there. Set it to that. Sign in. And if we go to buckets, our bucket's automatically there. If we go into here, we go to scopes and collections. We see all of our scopes. And then if we were to go into like personnel, we should see their offices and our user profiles collections. So we're good. It's awesome. We can see here that we've got all of our collections and scopes automatically set up. So I very quickly was able to make a database server, make it a bunch of places to put data, and automate all that really quickly with Docker Compose. If you're trying to do this to Kubernetes, which is what they call K8S, Kubernetes services, right? Or Azure Kubernetes services, or Google Kubernetes services, and EWS for Elastic Kubernetes services. These are Amazon. Each one of the big cloud providers, Amazon, Azure, and Google, provide their own Kubernetes services so that you don't have to manage your own cluster. It does all the hard work for you, but you could use a piece of software called Helm. Helm is the like Docker Compose for Kubernetes. Helm, AKS. And so if you're looking to learn how to get into DevOps, for example, Helm is going to be your best friend. This is super awesome. Helm allows you to do all kinds of automation things. It's one of my favorite tools out there if you're getting into DevOps. As a developer advocate, I have to know not only how to code, but also a lot of things in DevOps. So I think a lot about automation and stuff. So I happen to have a bunch of different things in my wheelhouse underneath this. But for right now, we're going to use Docker Compose and keep our life easy. So we just got Couchbase Server up and running, which means now we can start taking a look at some .NET code of how do we automatically import our data into the database, because that's the next thing. Remember, I was telling you we want to use these X attributes. So if we go back over to here, I probably can put this in another window here because we've got our Kubernetes up and running, but now we can go back to Rider and take a look at, I have another project I was telling you about that I have in Rider for the data loader. So here is our Rider data loader program. So let's close out of our, now we know that this is how our app shell is working. In order to move forward, we really need to get some sample data of user profiles. So you'll see here right now, I've got a .NET command console program, and that's probably the easiest way to do this. It's just a console program. Now we will want to do a couple different automations here. To start out with, we're going to have to go to our NuGet packages, and we're probably going to want to load in, well, not probably, we're going to have to load in Couchbase. Because we have to have the ability to talk to the Couchbase server. I don't want release candidate, so I don't want release candidate 3 here. I want just regular Couchbase server. Oh, let's see here. Too many listed here. I guess I want the .NET right here, but I don't want that release candidate. Why am I seeing only release candidates instead of something of my filters here is telling it, oh, pre-release. Turn off pre-release. There we go. We want this version right here. So we're just going to grab, we don't need the dependency injection right now, per se. So we're just going to grab this because this is just a data loader. All right, so that should get us the .NET client installed in our program. So let's see here. So we need to know where the data is located. Well, we know that from our Maui, or excuse me, our VS Code window that we had open. Let me bring this back over here. Maybe this would be easier to do in VS Code because we can keep everything open. I guess what's yeah, Writer's not going to give me the ability to easy to see these other files. Yeah, let's do this in VS Code, I guess. Here's our data loader. Here's our program, right? So if we look at it, we know that we have a file folder called automation. So the program's always going to run out of this data loader. It's technically speaking being in the bin directory here and debug.net 8. And so what's probably going to happen is that's actually wrong. We're probably going to have to do a couple of dot slashes back, or we're going to have to do like a we have to hard code this somehow to say what the directory is. So because you can see here that the program's 3 directories deep, 1, 2, 3. So, and that would get you to the root of this directory. And then you need to go one more up from that. So I think what we're gonna have to do is this. I think that's the right answer of how many periods we need, but we're about to find out. So let's see here. 1, 2, 3 would get us to this directory, and we need to get out of this directory to see automation. So we need 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So we know that the root directory is going to be automation / data generation. So now we can look at files we want to get, right? So if we go to the data generation, one of the first things we want to get is, because we're working on user profiles, is user profiles. So let's even go back out of here and say, well, that's, don't get me wrong, I think we need to figure out this orders, right, eventually. But let's actually kill that right now and just make a JSON file. We'll call this user profiles location. And this will be / and then all we have to do is say now is it'd be in there. So we say /, let's put a / in here so we don't have to put slashes everywhere. And then we just say that this is user profiles. JSON. Okay. We also need to make these. This is going to be where Rider would probably be easier for this, using system IO. We're going to need system IO because we want to make these paths. And I think it's called file.path. C# file.path. I think that's what we want. The path class should give us the ability to say where something is in the file system. All right, so instantly it's already telling me this will be different in Windows than Mac. Poop. Well, I'm on a Mac only right now, so I don't care about that per se. But we should be able to say path dot. This is what I wanted right here combined. So we want to say here, we'll say const string user profile path equals path dot combine. Ooh, this would be path dot. What? See, why are you doing that to me? Combine. Yes, it would be JSON file location and user profile location. That would give us the path to it. And now we could say, we could check to see whether or not that file exists. Say file dot, if file dot. Writers might be better for this because VS Code's code suggestions are garbage. Let's go back to Writer. I think I'm just used to Writer. So let's see here. So obviously, since I have the file open, see, Writer's already telling me stuff. What's going on here? Yeah, this would be. And then what? I think it's just saying that this isn't used yet. Yep. So we'd say if file Actually, I think what we want to do. Actually, this code's pretty easy to read. I don't think we need to put comments in here. So we're going to say else console. Right. We'll just right line the file name either way. Okay. We'll start with this. And let's just run this thing and see whether or not it sees the pathing right. So we need to switch over to our data loader. We're going to run this on the Mac as a console program. So this should run. Oh, we probably should have said, we should probably send a message that says we found it. And this is string interpolation, so we're using the ability to do that. Now we should be able to say whether or not we found it or not. Found file. So it found. Why do I have $sign in there? I must accidentally have $2. Oh, that's right. You don't need $sign anymore. That's for the old style of string format. All right. We found our file. So then what we could do is now we can start to load that in. So we need let's look at the Couchbase docs. We are going to want to load those in and then serialize those to make mutable documents and then save those into Couchbase using X attributes. And so let's make a function. So we'd say, oops, sorry, wrong language. Private void load user profiles, and let's move some of this code out so we can make this a little bit easier to manage. And then we can move this out, all this code out. Okay. Last private man. We don't need it because it's a local function declaration. Okay. And let's see here. Okay. Let's just run this, make sure that this change worked, and so it does exist. So now what we're going to do is we need to serialize this, right? So now we've got this code separated out. We can do our serialization. So the first thing is we know that file exists. So it's look at that. So there we go. We get our JSON. Let's look at this. Okay, so Ryder's already writing code for us. That's pretty cool. Yep, that's all the stuff we need. That's exactly what we wanted. Okay, so it's reading our JSON file. That's cool, right? So now we would need to serialize that. So let's do real quick here. Actually, we were using Copilot. So let's go to Copilot here, say, I don't know why it's doing that. We want to, how can I use the built-in .NET serialization to load in a string of JSON data into C# objects. Now we're going to have a problem. Our models are Yeah, the problem's going to be, see this user profile? That's in our Maui application. And so that's why, if you remember a couple streams back, I was trying to get the models out of the main Maui app because we don't want to put a reference to the data loader here just to get our models out right here, right? This is where some of the problems start to come in, where if you don't have like the models separated out into a separate library, you can't reuse them in multiple programs. And that's where some problems start to come in, right? So how do we solve that problem? You don't want to have the code cut and paste the code in two spots, because if you change the model, you have to change the two spots, right? And you don't want to load the data loader in, right? So now we have the problem where we have a data loader, and then we have our Maui program here that we both want to use the same code here, right? So this is a problem. I still go back to, I think we need a library, and we need to build some of these things in that. Let's add a new project where this is going to be a class library. We're going to call this, and this will be Pico objects only, plain old C# objects. Okay, we're going to keep it down to that. We'll call this .NET CB Lite inventory models. We'll make a separate library just for our models. We'll call it data. Data gonna work? No. All right. Delete this. With the delete key on the keyboard. We gotta do some refactoring here, folks. Again, models. I'm gonna move these. Okay. So this should be the right namespace. So let's just go back here and check. We'll change the namespace of that. Apply. Oop. That's right. Let's go back here for a second. Fix the rest. These are two files. We want to make sure that these are fixed. We don't need that either. Offices, we need to just change this. And that should fix all three of those files. We should just be able to build this. Build, stop, build, and run. Build is green. That means that worked. So now what we have to do, though, is do a bunch of fixing. So we have to go to dependencies, add a reference to our models. And then we're gonna have to go to all of our view models and fix those, because this namespace could be wrong. So we need to change this out to take Maui out. Just do a substitution. Find. So these are the places we want to do it in. My won't be in the program. It'll only be in these. Be in our login view model. Probably also talk to it. Or not. Our services are mad. And then mock authentication service is going to be bad. And that doesn't use it. Authentication, this doesn't use it either. Our app looks like it's mad, so I'm assuming it does use it. I don't see. That's just wrong for other reasons. The writer's not being all that great with it. All right, so we can kill the models folder here. We don't have anything in it. We don't want to advertise what we do. Let's just try building this to see if it builds. If it does, then we have the quickest refactor we can do. Well, get the data loader working, and then I think we'll call the stream. Let's see here, make sure there's nobody asking questions on any of the other platforms. That we look like we're doing good here. It's just building Android right now, and Android takes a few seconds. I'm going to assume that's going to work. Let's kind of go back to our work here. So we want to try to get things done here. And then let's close this out so we got models. So then what we do here is in data loader, we'd add a reference to our models and succeeded. Perfect. Okay. So now that we have that, technically speaking, we could use our Copilot recommendation here, because we would need to add that code in. And so this will be, we need to use system text JSON. So it's going to say import system text JSON, and then here we're going to import in our models. And so we should see those two imports up here. Perfect. For some reason, it doesn't say we need system IO. That's weird, but we don't need the template information there either. But we see here, we'll put here load data types into Codebase server. And this is end of program. That usually, when I put this in, end of file usually means end of program back in the old days. That's what we used to put in. Okay. And now what we should do, be able to do is say for each, actually user, can you use user profiles for each? Yeah. Oh, it just does a code. And we'll say console. Let's do this. This should loop through each one of the users and make sure we have one. Or bust. I didn't get any users, so let's see here. This is where we troubleshoot. We should probably be doing something like this. So then this is also be a debug. We only want to debug. We don't want to show this stuff out if we're debugging. Oh, There we go. New C# syntax. Why writer rocks? All right. I guess we're having issues with JSON. Serialization. Are we not calling the load data profile? Call user profile, read key. Those user profiles should say. So it should find the file. It should try to load the JSON. And if this happens, else this. Neither one of those is happening, so we should probably do this. Get a stack trace and see if it's blowing up. We want to know it's blowing up and why it's blowing up. Getting nothing anyway. Let's put a breakpoint in right here. See what's going on here. I like breakpoints. This is really weird. I would expect. Oh, I'm an idiot. There is a dialog that's asking for my username and password to run the Mac program. It's been sitting there for minutes and I didn't see it because it's on a different part of the screen. Here we go. User profiles is getting data in it. It just because I was debugging it needed to ask my password to get access to the file system. So you can see here, here's our JSON. So I'm debugging. Might as well just take a look at this, right? Talk about debugging in .NET. One reason why Rider is really awesome. Rider gives us the ability to see our threads in our stack. So we can see here on our tech stack or our stack and heap, we got on the stack a variable called JSON. Here's the values. Here's our profile path. And here's our profiles. And we have 17 user profiles. We can go in and take a look at each one of those. We could drill in to see the various fields and records. So that's pretty interesting. They're all null. Why are they all null? So we know how many lines were in the file, but we're not. Okay, that's really interesting. That's not what I expected to get back. Let's look at the JSON file again. Okay, where's my stack? So this is called watchers, usually in this will tell you all the different classes that it has in memory, which is pretty cool. But this is why I want threads and variables. So let's look at the JSON. It is an array of user profiles. So I have an array, profile D. Oh, they're lowercase names. Is that why? Do we have to tell the JSON serializer how the models work? Yeah, because these are first names. C#, what's that, Copilot? It knows my JSON files, I think, but in my JSON data, the properties for the model are in serializer through attributes to use the lower case with upper case property names. There's usually an annotation you put on top of this, and we'll see if Copilot can tell us that. JSON property name, and that's what we need right there. So we'll say this. We have to import that. Oh boy. C#, how to set a JSON property name on a record struct. How do we do that? Different syntax. According to this, it says we need this property : JSON property. And then we say hello. And we do it like that. That's Newtonsoft though. Using system text. I'm Googling this on our screen. There we go. That's the syntax for it. Yay, us. We can Google. All right, let's see here. So we just have to copy and paste that in front of every one of our properties. We'll just cut and paste this and change the property name in front of each of these, and we're done. I'm using VI, so of course that's why, if you're wondering why certain things are happening where they are, is that. And I forgot to grab that, so let's put that in. Shoot. And then we can just change these to lowercase and magic sauce. Do we have offices in the JSON data? Because we'll have to do the offices too then. Where is the user profiles? We do have offices, so we have to also fix the serialization for offices, which have an office ID and a name. Yep. So we would have to do it here. We'll cheat. In ASP.NET, they do this for you. They automatically convert from upper to lowercase, which is really nice. I'm sure there's probably some way in this console program I could try to tell it to do that, but because it's not a huge deal here. All right, so I should get office, and then in the JSON file, what are the offices called? I think there's called offices, lowercase. But let's double check so that we're not going through the well here. Where did my code? All right. In our user profile, they're called offices. All right, that should fix our serialization problem. Let's go ahead and rerun our program. Oops, let's stop it. Debug our program. We want to be able to hit that breakpoint. So there we are. 17, but do we have data now? Oh, we got data. Look at this. We're getting beautiful data. Offices, we're getting 3. Offices is not loading though. Look at here. So we have an office assignment. So I didn't somehow fix one of the serializations here. So let's look at our models again. So we have office. Office assignment is an office. Office ID here. And a string of type. But if I look at the data, we do have a property called office. Shoot. And then we have a property called type. All right. Well, that's my script. Own it. That's the best way to do something. Is if you make a mistake, just own it. Don't. People ask me how I sleep at night, and I say pretty well, because if I make a mistake, I mean, obviously there's ramification for making mistakes, but try not to dwell on it too hard. I try not to get too hard down on myself. I'm a human. I make mistakes all the times. Instead, it's can I learn from that mistake and then move on and do better next time. That's really my goal. And so if we go here, offices, office assignment, there we go. We have Santa Clara with the Santa Clara, and then that's our primary office. If we look here for Jessica Moore, she should have 2 secondary offices. One of them's Atlanta, and the other one should be New York City. And New York City, is it there? Oh, right. We are rolling. This is cool. This is a good place to be here. Let's see. Check on time. I'm running out of it. All right, but I think this is a good place to stop. So we could say now that we know that we have more than a user. So now we'll put just the message to do set X attributes. And save to the database. So in here, we'll have to make like a function that goes and gets the database, right? Gets a pointer to the database. So that way we don't have to do that in all of our methods, our data loading attributes. This should be the letter I here. There we go. Wait. Oh. X. Okay, that's our to-do. We can say that we know we're there. We know that this isn't happening. We'll debug that out if somebody wants to run it. We'll eventually make a logger. We'll do a to-do here to do a file logger. So that way, if somebody were to run this as a console program, they could just look at the file and see what the hell is happening. When you load a bunch of data, you don't want to have to like try to debug this, right? This should be working. Eventually, you'd hand this off to somebody in IT, and they would run it, as part of whatever process. So we probably should make that semi-functional. But that works, right? We've got a console program that's reading in our JSON file. It's going through, making sure that the data's there, making sure we have the fields we care about. We've got our serialization figured out. We've got our syntax for setting our models up. We now have our models shared out so that we can use them in multiple programs. We can use them both in our Maui app, in our data loader app. This also means that when I work on Uno, the models will be the same, right? And if I also bring in a Avalonian program, I could also use the same models. So I'm going to reuse those classes as much as possible. By making this a standard library that doesn't know anything about iOS or stuff like that, that makes this super easy to be shared between multiple projects and stuff. So that's it. So I think we are good to go for today. So on Monday, I will hopefully not be sick, and I should be back with the Monday lunch stream. We'll actually get this Stockton Couchbase server. We'll write a quick method that goes through, or a function that goes through and gives us a connection to the database. We'll load these records in. We'll set the X attribute for those so that we know how Sync Gateway needs to talk to us. We'll load them into the database, and we'll do some tuning and see how fast everything runs. So before we go, though, we should also make sure that we stop our Couchbase server from running, because otherwise it's going to chew all my resources on my machine. So the beautiful thing about all this with Docker, I can just click the stop button, and it'll stop both Couchbase server and Sync Gateway, and I don't have to do any work. And that way it's not chewing up memory on my computer when I don't need it, but when I need it, I can run it. And so that's one of the great things about Docker. You're not running it all the time. You can see here that was chewing 12% of my CPU. When you're streaming, that's a lot of CPU to be given up to running some servers. And that's it. They're shut down. So now when I need them again, when I'm working on my mobile app, I can start those up, and I don't have to worry about them chewing up all my resources at all times. This is a really great reason to run Docker, especially if you're doing any kind of development and with mobile, and you have to use a REST endpoint, and it's like a custom REST endpoint that another team on your team's working on. Docker is pretty great. So, folks, thanks everybody for who went through and watched, especially for watching on demand. Thank you for your time. And I look forward to seeing you on the next one, where we'll go through and we'll start working on writing these documents to the database and then calling them up in our mobile app. We'll see how mobile sync works. You can see how dynamically we won't have to call any REST APIs. Data just magically shows up. It's pretty awesome. So look forward to that. Look forward to seeing you guys next week. Have a great weekend. Be kind to each other, and I'll